sparrow finds a place by your altar, even the wanderer who roams, even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, we're coming home. Surrounded by friends and feast. The table is set. We will sit down, surrounded by friends and feast. Even the sparrow finds a place by your altar. Even the wanderer who roams, even the fatherless is embraced by the Father. We're coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, coming home, we're coming home. We're coming home, we're coming home, we're coming home, coming home. The table is set, we will sit down, surrounded by friends.
Good morning. I just for Job, I decided to not wear a blue shirt, even though the plaids monkey with the camera. Welcome. It's Friday morning in California time, Friday afternoon, East Coast US, Friday evening for the Europeans. And we have another Friday estuary style live stream. What that means is that I have absolutely no idea what we'll talk about. But the group itself that has assembled and volunteered themselves. And if you ask, how can you be a part of these Friday live streams? All you have to do is be a member at the low randos level on the on my membership group. And often you can pick those up for free during a live stream. There's often given away. Rick and Ups often, release big ones. And sometimes we get, like last week, we had a mix of a lot of first timers and real random people. And this week we just have a mix of a fair number of veterans, but we do have a new face and a new name that is here today. And Jeff, welcome. Thank you for signing up.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? This, I think, is, I don't know if I've seen you before, at least on my channel.
I'm in Australia. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I've basically been following a lot of your stuff for probably, goodness me, for probably nearly 8 years. Like most, Jordan Peterson got me interested. I think right back in 2016, I was there was something about his discussion with those people in Canada about forced speech. So I've been on that same thing. I was born before 1950. I'm now working as a counsellor. I've been a dairy farmer. I ran a Christian conference centre for 8 to 10 years. Towards the end of that, my first wife came down with a brain tumour. She passed away in 1995, married again in 2005 in China. she was a lady that I knew here in a church that I went to in Sydney when I was after I left the conference centre. I started a software company doing school reporting software. It was an idea that we came up with when we were at the conference centre. Then I reluctantly worked as a chaplain at a South Sydney, the parish of South Sydney, for 8 years, and discovered that I loved that work. That was the first time that I tackled academic pursuits, and now I'm working as a counsellor, and I love that. That's really good. And I guess I've followed your journey along the way. I had a friend who was a Uniting Church minister. He's now joined the Catholics. And yeah, so it's been very interesting following all that. One of the things that I've joined Substack, and I've just started to try and write some thoughts. That's one of the things. One of the things that I found really interesting after the Charlie Kirk shooting, you wonder what gets people motivated. And there's a guy on Substack, I don't know if you've heard of him, Rob Henderson, and he came up with some research in some 2023 research by a guy Kateely, and the research showed that people on the right tend to despise. And look, I'm on the right. My father was a Methodist home missionary for 10 years. It left the farm to, and at this time there was a shortage of ministers in the Methodist Church, a lot of very small churches around country Victoria. So that's where I was from the age of 4 to 14. Then the old man went back onto the farm, and it wasn't long. He had there was an accident, a tractor rollover, and at the age of 21, I became a two-enterprise dairy farmer.
Wow. Accidentally.
I resented that, but it didn't take me long to realise that it sort of made me, it was a maturing event for me.
I can imagine that.
But the thing that's exercising my mind at the moment is Rob Henderson's.
Well, why don't we hold off on that for the pitch? So,
yeah, okay.
But,
good. Cool.
But 3 a.m. Thank you. It's rough, I can imagine. But so thank you. All right, let's see. Jason, another veteran. Jason, you've been on a few times and recently. So just a little introduction for maybe someone who didn't catch those live streams.
Sure. Live in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's raining out right now, which is, it's pretty fantastic. I was born in the center of the Dutch universe in Granville, Michigan, and did all the Dutch things. Went to all the Calvin schools that you could go to for at least part time. But I made my way out here to Phoenix and Married a Mexican gal, and I'm basically a chaplain that works with folks in recovery.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Jason Yonker. And boy, figuring out who to bring in next. I've done a lot with Paul on the channel, but Paul hasn't been. Is this your first time on a Friday morning estuary live stream or second?
I think second.
Second. Okay.
But who's counting?
But who's counting? Paul Renee, how do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm the corner's favorite Orthodox crank. How about that?
All right, that could very well be. That could very well be. And Jeremy, our Irishman from the Netherlands. When Jason said center of Dutchness in Granville, Michigan, I thought, boy, some of those people in the Netherlands might feel a little pushed aside. Jeremy, welcome. How would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. Hello to everybody, and hello especially to Jeff. Good to see you as a newbie. Yeah, I'm an Irishman living in Holland. I think I'm kind of, this isn't my pitch, but I'm getting very interested in what it means to be deconstructed without choosing deconstruction, right? And to experience the de-wisdoming of the generations. It's not quite how I want to put it, but that's all I can think of right now.
All right. Well, you can pitch that again. I saw recently that Neil had the introductions and the pitches together. That might work pretty well for a live stream. We might play with that in weeks coming. But probably our most seasoned veteran here is the Calvinist himself, the director of Sartori Studios. Also the author of not only a big fat book, but a pretty, I think a pretty awesome Substack, Michael Sartori. Michael,
Hello.
welcome.
Thank you.
I don't know how much introduction Michael needs, probably not a lot. And so, Jeff, I'm sorry I interrupted you before, but I wanted to get the rest of these horses in because it sure seemed like you were revving up for a pitch about Rob Henderson. So the way we work this estuary thing is first we do introductions, and then we pitch an idea to the group. And then we do another round where we point an idea that somebody else has said. And so, Jeff, since this is sort of your first time in, you get the honor of throwing out the first pitch.
Okay. Well, basically, I'll just read out the thing that caught my eye from, and he wrote a thing called What Charlie Kirk's Murder Reveals About Historical Amnesia, a 2023 study from Sykes, Christopher Petsko and Noor Kateli uncovered something troubling about how Americans see one another. And despite the fact that we've got a stupid government at the moment, we follow America pretty closely. Conservatives tend to view liberals as immature, irresponsible, gullible, and irrational. Liberals, in turn, tend to see conservatives as savage, aggressive, cold-hearted, and barbaric. The researchers found something even more revealing. Liberals overestimate how dehumanized they are by conservatives. They think conservatives view them more negatively than they do, but conservatives underestimate how dehumanized they are by liberals. They think liberals view them more positively than they do. That's a quote from Rob Henderson. When I read that, that seemed to make a lot of sense. It actually made somewhat rational why Tyler Robinson felt justified in shooting Charlie Kirk. And I guess all it was something I thought, yeah, maybe that makes sense. So I guess that's what I'd like to discuss or like to hear other opinions on.
Very good. Thank you, Jeff. Excellent pitch. Jason, what would you like to pitch?
I'd like to talk about sanctification and how that happens, especially on a society level. I work with a lot of baby Christians, and it seems like Christianity changes lives, but it doesn't necessarily make people into sterling middle class bourgeois replicants, and it's very uneven. Someone can become really, really dedicated to a work ethic and not letting the thief no longer steal, but they're knocking up their girlfriend and just can't seem to get that under control. And there's different combinations of that, but it's just like, what does it take for society to just kind of hit that tipping point and become a more sanctified culture, I guess.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much, Jason. Paul Renee, what pitch you?
So I mean, everybody knows I've been on this whole.
I thought you were going to pass.
What?
Never mind.
Okay.
You were never going to pass.
Okay. So I've been on this whole post-liberal saw, and for lack of a better way of framing it and giving it a proper name. And I mean, everybody with the whiff of Jonathan Peugeot knows he's been saying we're at the end of something. And you know, there's the Ukrainian girl and Charlie Kirk, and when I think about all of this, you know, and the deconstruction of the Christian Reformed Church, you know, which I've talked about, and it's become a popular subject in our little corner. A name or a way of expressing this more concretely came to me recently, and I'll say outright, this is not the eschaton. Jesus is not coming tomorrow, but the age we are in is the eschaton of Protestantism and the Enlightenment. And the Bonnie Blue Chris Williams video, Louise Perry says something to the effect of, what creeps people out about you is that you're going to the end, the extreme end of the logical conclusion of all these liberal ideas. And so I think ultimately where we are is Protestantism and the Enlightenment have reached their conclusion, and something else has to come in and fill that void.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Paul Renee. Jeremy, what do you have on your mind?
So about maybe 2 months ago, Elon Musk had a tweet which was, we need to do a one shot on the limbic system, and then in brackets, and yes, this will include natalism. So briefly, the limbic system is that part of the brain which fuses your senses, your hearing, your sight, with your emotions, your hormonal system. And it's why when you look at something, you get transported back to the past and you feel a deep connection with it, right? And what I was thinking is that we live in a world where the limbic system, our biological basis of how we learn to love something, has been captured. And not just captured in a small period of time, but captured over almost a century, ever since, you know, Bernays and propaganda started to fold out. And now we have TV and other types of media which are continuously pushing and forcing us to be overwritten, right? So we're no longer independent, and historically haven't been for a long time. Now, and I'm going to be quick, Paul. I don't want to ramble. I don't think turning off the TV or turning off the YouTube is going to work. I don't think individually doing this on your own and opting to transform yourself can work. And I see two problems with why it won't work, which the first one I would call like a time constraint. If your society is functionally collapsing and you're going to run out of children through a demographic collapse, you don't have 25 years to be able to make, to reformat the civilization, to reformat the manner of interaction between people. And I think the second part of it is that what I would call a scaling constraint, which would be that if we as individuals, if I individually improve myself, that's important, but it's a sine non qua. You have to basically do that in order to be able to play the game. But the scaling challenge is, how do I move from individually sorting my out and then transforming that up to a bigger scale, right? And I think these are two issues where you need to have a limbic one shot, which is basically if you have something like AI, if you that you take that tool and you use it to reprogram people in a way subtly, or you use it to express fundamental values and to inject them into society, because maybe you need to do that at pace, given the time constraint, and maybe you need to do it at a wide breadth, given the scale constraint.
I think you just one shot at me with that pitch. All right, Jeremy. One heck of a pitch. Michael.
Okay, I made sure I had a real pitch before.
Yeah. No creeping the third round into the second.
Okay, so I was thinking about the Chesterton heretics thing you were bringing up, and that whole conversation, and it had brought to mind a thought that I had. You know, the common kind of wisdom saying everything in moderation, which is an extreme saying because you're putting everything in moderation. And so, you know, maybe most things in moderation, but you know, there's this need for maybe extremity in some things, or asceticism, you know, in other things. But you know, it was that thing where we're talking about the people on the progressive side having this kind of vague thing that they're looking at, and they're not pointing to the ultimate good, and you know, and then on the other side you have you know, I see maybe sometimes so much focus on the ultimate good that it's impossible to do anything for fear of making mistakes. And so you know, saying ultimate goods versus comparative goods. And I was thinking, you know, well, the Bible it begins with a lot of comparative good. You have it's not good that the man is alone, but creation is good, and then it's very good. So you have even before the fall, you have comparative values, and you know, seems like a very useful tool. You know, I guess, and maybe it's while, you know, so I put Jesus in my ultimate good. That makes things easy for me. But having done that, then I noticed that, like, well, we need to figure out comparative goods for a lot of other things in life. So and that probably touches a lot on, like, what Jason was talking about, the societal sanctification. So that's my pitch.
Okay. Lots of really good pitches today. I will pass. Jeff, of what other people said, what caught your attention?
I think, Jeremy, the what's going on with society, the absence of children, the birth rate that's going on, the lack of hope in society, the dysfunction that we see. While I was working as a chaplain, and this is a inner city Sydney housing area, and so you see people right at the lower end of society, lacking hope, caught up in all sorts of addictions. That caught my attention. My response to that was something has to change. And, my little effort, I took an interest in some of the work around EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I found that interesting, just dealing with some of the traumas early on, that childhood, early life experiences that seem to really affect people, and the way they respond, seeking to moderate the pain with substances. That's been interesting, but the way in which people respond is always different, sometimes disappointing. But I guess I also think, who am I to judge their responses? Another little thing that occurred, and I don't know how it did, while the other gentlemen were talking about the issue, is that recently I found it very interesting following the teaching of Michael Heiser. I found that very interesting, and it's actually renewed my interest in, because there are so many things that we skip over in scripture. So I found that illuminating. I've enjoyed his teaching in that area. That idea just popped up probably from something that maybe it was something that Michael said, I think.
All right. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Jason, what would you like to point to?
I do think the conservative liberal perceptions of each other is kind of interesting, and how I think a lot of people in this corner may have gone from liberal to conservative through the Jordan Peterson and Peugeot pipeline, and just how that happened, and how disagreeableness probably fits in with that.
Okay. Very good. Paul Renee, what would you like to point to?
I mean, I have to confess, I don't really understand Michael's pitch at all. But
is it an ultimate good or a comparative good for Paul Renee to get a girlfriend?
That's a whole Twitter rabbit hole we don't want to go down right now. I'm saving that for when Paul actually does our I don't know, 10-year delayed rando conversation. I mean, the limbic system stuff. I mean, I'm not a huge science boy anymore, but there's something in that. But that, I mean, I think that ultimately ties into the moral relativism and degradation of civilization. There's something very wrong with the way we're living, and I don't know that I would try to take some sort of brainstem framing of that. And frankly, Elon Musk scares me. He wants to put the internet in my brain, and I think it's in there enough right now. Thank you very much. And the I mean, the liberal versus conservative stuff. Everybody's a liberal.
Okay, Paul, the point of this pointing round is a point.
So, I mean, I mean, I
You're
don't.
processing externally. I get it, but I want to point.
I mean, it's. I'm not exactly. I think all of this stuff is circling the same center, which is things are breaking down, and we're not getting along, and we can't have a conversation because we don't have the same beliefs or metaphysics anymore. That's what it feels like to me. The kind of stuff that would get people to, like, people would have premarital sex, say, but they'd have the shotgun wedding. That's not happening more. That's like the differential sanctification bit. And people not loving, well, we're all sitting at home watching Netflix and ordering DoorDash. And the liberal versus conservative thing is, it's the same thing. Is we're not a common people anymore with a common set of beliefs and a common set of metaphysics.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Paul. Jeremy, what would you like to point to?
Oh, you're muted.
You're muted, Jeremy.
And that's why I picked that person. I would point to Michael, because I think it solves the problem of, like, the difficulty of grasping belief systems and understanding what they offer you, versus the reality of living life, and trying to get one step further down the path. And I think that's very practical, and I like that, so I point to Michael.
All right. Michael, what would you like to point to?
I'll point to Jason, because I like that thought of sanctification, and that it should hopefully apply both to individuals and to communities in some way.
Okay. I'm going to sort of, now that the votes are all over the map, it's hard to sort of figure out Paul Renee's vote, because it's kind of back to his in some ways, but he pointed to a lot of different ones. But I'd like to sort of cross Jeremy's and Jason's, because I think they are in some ways pointing to the same issue. When Jason talks about the fact that basically a religious transformation or a conversion is sort of a one-shotting. In one moment, someone is sort of reoriented in a new direction. And as Jason notes, in an individualist society, when that happens, that won't necessarily bleed up very clearly to, let's say, getting into some of Michael's issues about every aspect. They might say, as Jason, and there's a fair amount of commonality between Jason's pitch and Michael's pitch too, in terms of, they're sold out for Jesus, but they're with Augustine and saying, Lord, make me celibate, just not yet. But Jeremy's, that limbic system where sort of it all comes together. I was on Substack this morning. I saw Sarah Hyder, who I don't know her work very well. My impression is that she's sort of one of these former new atheists that still doesn't believe in God, but has sort of become kind of a utilitrad, noting that, oh my gosh, religion used to be the enemy. Now we really need it, or we're going to slide down into this left-wing abyss. And her posting, I don't know if she just had a baby, but her posting was, I assume, her finger and this tiny little newborn's hand around it, and making a point that, well, basically she got one-shotted by being a mother. And this experience of childbearing and now motherhood has completely rearranged her world, which is something that we've been talking about with the sort of drought of women wanting to have children. And then suddenly when they do have children, you see their limbic system sort of gets one-shotted in that now they are a mom. They have swapped categories from maid into motherhood, and there is no going back. And the reason there is no going back, because that love of that baby has rearranged their entire moral imaginary and sometimes rearranged their politics and everything like that. And so to me, that connects with Jason's pitch and Jeremy's pitch and Michael's pitch. And I think you can very much see some of that disconnect that Jeff pointed to and that Paul really pointed to, that to some degree, people's worldviews, the goal of a worldview is to frame experience and to organize it, because our relevance realization has to happen. Things need to be organized if we're going to live in a world of order. And sometimes people of very different orientations struggle to communicate with each other and especially to work together. And again, this sort of boils down into Michael's point about ultimate goods and relative goods, because usually when people of differing worldviews come together, it's because you can look at, let's say, when a nation faces a crisis like Pearl Harbor. Throughout the Roosevelt administration and the Second World War, there was plenty of politicking going on, but no one denied the fact that they wanted to win these wars. And so, yeah, maybe we'll begin. Jeremy, why don't you say a little bit more about your pitch, and then maybe to Michael, or then maybe to Jason, and then we'll just go from there.
Okay. I think what's useful to consider is that I'm not talking about an adding of something, but maybe more a taking away of something by using technology or some other, or social constructs to take away a type of programming which has been inputted into people, right? So regarded as a freeing of rather than a turning into. In the sense that in the Matrix, people didn't know they were in the Matrix, and what was the solution? It was to turn off the Matrix. It wasn't to kind of like try to figure out who you, well, actually, okay, it was try to kind of figure out who you were. But you know what I'm saying? For most people, they had no opportunity to be able to extract themselves from it. But the destruction of the system was required. And I think that, to put the natal spin on it, although we don't need and I'll necessarily go into that angle, like I was shocked about a week ago to see an advertisement that incidentally had a child in it, right? Obviously it's part of the mise en scène, right? So perhaps there was a reason, but it felt incidental, right? Because it wasn't a product aimed at a child, and it just seems strange. Now, is it to be as bad as the system, to try to impose positive values into the system in order that those positive values get replicated? Or, do we just go, well, I'll individuate myself, I'll travel my own path and do good in the community while continuing to live in a matrix where you're totally disempowered simply because you refuse to recognize the concrete block on your shoulders, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Jason, when I looked at Jeremy and your pitch, was I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I definitely see some overlap there as well. He's talking about, I think he's talking about how to scale up, right? In a society, how do we scale up these good values that we want to see in a society? It's a good society to live in. Yeah. And how do they get scaled up?
Yeah. One of the interests. Go ahead.
Sorry. Just very quickly, one of the things that jumped to my mind when you said sanctification was, so the word sacred comes from sacrum, which means two things. It means what we know as sacred, but it comes from the idea of setting something apart. And if you set something apart, it's because you regard it as sacred. But also you can set something apart because you regard it as filthy and disgusting. right? It needs to be an out. So sacred means both sacred and outcast at the same time. Right? And I guess that kind of gets to some of the tensions in the ideas of scaling that we're talking about. Is that, a vaccine is poison taken into to fight death, as Jonathan Peugeot might suggest. Sorry, Paul.
Well, it's interesting to me that when you think about the individual versus the collective, Jesus and what happens around Jesus is very interesting in that, in some sense, he's got this little group of disciples and they're sort of doing their own thing. Now he's very popular because he's healing, and that, of course, always if you're really healing people, that really gets a lot of attention because there's always a lot of sick, needy people. He's also preaching, and he's doing that in a different way. And then his execution arises because even the warring powers that be decided that in some ways he was disrupting their war. And they couldn't quite figure out where to place him in their war. And so the easiest way to eliminate the interference for their war and the threats to their war and their achievements in their war was to kill him. But then, of course, what follows from Jesus is this, his disciples claim that he's resurrected, but, they don't trot him out and bring him to Caesar's door and to Herod's palace. Instead, they start all these little groups that in many ways, when I preach in the book of Revelation, every time I read that book, it's like, it always surprises me because you've got these tiny little groups in Asia Minor that are 20, 30, 50, 100 people. And this vision that John gives them is this global apocalyptic vision. And we don't read it with that kind of shock anymore. And so this tension, I hear in Paul Renee's pitch very much an apocalyptic sense that the world is changing. But it's, on one hand, these tiny little groups of people that, in fact, finally do change the world, but often through people like Constantine, who look at that little group and say, yeah, and let's then implement that through the empire, shall we? And we've never quite figured out if that was a good thing or not. Go ahead, Jeff.
The thoughts that come up, and I think it came from Paul Renee, what do we do about society, the dysfunction in society? The biggest shock in counseling is how illiterate the world is about biblical truth. And to some sense, the solution is really going to be the local church. Was it Larry Crabb that said the safest place to be is the local church? It's about the only place where people can go and it doesn't always happen, but without being harangued, you can actually hear truth. You can actually, if the word has been preached, you actually will be hearing truth. And the way back for society is for people to start to feel comfortable about getting back to the local church. Yeah, a little bit of hero worship here, Paul. I've loved the way you've stuck with your little church in Sacramento. There's, I've been in so many little churches that they're dying, but in some sense they're not. So I guess that's just a reflection on what I've been hearing.
I wonder if what Jonathan Peugeot says about, any culture or society being based upon a death of some kind is applicable here. And if this generation of childless couples could function as that death for a rebirth afterwards, that this generation that just didn't make the next generation is going to cause such the loss of those unrealized babies could be the death from which people go, oh, we got to get our stuff back on track.
Very quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Paul. I'll be very quick. My only worry there, Jason, is it like, St. Augustine writing about the sack of Rome, where they go, maybe it was a bad idea to hire so many German mercenaries into the army, right? You realize the truth, but it's too late. There's no getting back.
I mean, there's two things with Jason and Jeremy here. To me, a good church has got rich, successful people who've got their lives together, and it's got poor, destitute alcoholics who can't pay their alimony. So there's always going to be this, maybe you could say, differential salvation. And then on the idea of injecting values, like good values into society, this is something I've been moaning about a while in other TLC spaces. Is I think it has a lot to do with memetics. There's the talk about the Charlie Kirk assassination and the trans lover and all this other stuff. Well, both the kind of girl boss, what is a woman? A woman is someone who goes to college and gets a career, and the trans stuff, and earlier the eating disorder thing, those have all been mind viruses that spread really quickly through this mimetic pathway. And so I think if the Rob Henderson we're talking about is the one who is the luxury beliefs guy, is that okay?
Yeah.
And this ties into what I said about a good church. It's got the king in it, and it's got the destitute poor in it, and it's got everyone in between, and they're all in communion. That's the proper balance, because this sort of anonymized, I send money to the federal government and they give welfare out to people I don't know, versus I'm a wealthy guy in the church and I'm lending to someone who needs it. There's a back and forth relationship and accountability there that isn't there in this anonymized federal government welfare lottery. And there's also a modeling, because people can see I live a certain example in my life and I profess that, and so that's aligned, and they can have a target. But with the luxury beliefs, we have a caste of Brahmins who preach one thing and live a completely different way, and that has a downstream effect. And so I've been moaning about this, is it's the memetics. It's not the values, it's not the ideas. In some sense, it's the role models and the alignment between what they say and what they're doing. And we're not in communion together. People, I live in Central Texas, but people like me normally move to New York or Los Angeles, and live their lives out in that, or Texas, San Francisco, whatever. And so people are separating. They're not in community together. They're not setting good examples. And I think that's the issue. Not can we somehow inject good values into society and use propaganda to achieve that end. I don't think that is necessarily workable.
So would you say we need an aristocracy rather than
Well, we have an aristocracy. We pretend we don't.
But one that's
we need
specific.
the one that's functional and responsible and accountable to everybody else, rather than sort of feasting while we all starve.
Yeah, and I'll promote beliefs that will ultimately send you to ruin, or I won't judge beliefs and actions that you have that lend you to ruin. That increases my status, right, as the luxury belief. Rather than that, it would be an aristocracy within the church that promotes and holds a certain standard, and then is charitable to those who are not there.
Yeah, that's in the space of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I agree as far as having that, all in the church. I think the thing, it's like when do we have that? Like in some sense, it's like maybe you have that when you have a national church. You could say, well, obviously everybody's going to the same church, but in reality, where are those? Is the king going to the same actual like local church as the beggars, or that hasn't? I'm not saying that he probably should really, but that's probably not the way it's happened much in history. And so my thinking on this is, maybe we are. What's the area where you can have an organization? And I think it's like maybe it's not the denominational thing, because you have like a denomination that bears similar similarities, but it's spread out into a whole bunch of cities, or it might be concentrated.
I'll say that this is fractal.
Yeah.
So like, if we go back to Constantinople, the emperor went to Hagia Sophia.
Okay.
But in the local village, the local lord or mayor went to the church. So it's a fractal thing. It's not necessarily that the emperor gets around every village church. So I'm not. That's
yeah. And this is a thing where I think there is sort of maybe I don't know. I guess one of the other ways I was thinking about putting my pitch, or the alternate pitch, was something like in churches reclaiming the secular, like that secular space, and like the politics thing is like one, where we've had a lot of discussion about like, oh, Charlie Kirk, is it Christianity or is it politics? And America's kind of like, well, we don't have a king, but everybody's kind of a king. So it's like, how much can you disassociate from politics, and is that a preference that you can have, or is that an abdication of responsibility? But definitely, I think we probably have a much less of a we may have a good involvement in our local churches, but usually it's pretty cloistered within the church. It's like not really involving in the neighborhood or the town or the city. And so that was kind of my thing, thinking about the comparative values. It's like, I definitely agree with a lot of the, like, there is some kind of an apocalypse coming. I think perhaps, in my hopeful, optimistic way, like the birth collapse thing, it could be kind of a merciful apocalypse. Like, it's not, it may not necessarily result in a lot of conflict. It's just going to be people more spread out and not, there's going to be a lot of struggles. It's like going to put us in the aftermath of a war without having the war, something like that. And so I think, certainly there is the need to preserve tradition, or that's a need that's felt. But like, between my wife and I, it's like we couldn't necessarily hitch our wagons to one particular tradition, because that would probably alienate some of the good connections that we do have in our family and in our local communities and things like that. So instead, it's kind of looking across the broad range of traditions that are working, you could say, and seeing what is common among them. And I think this is kind of a general sense, even like, this was the message that it was apparently on Charlie Kirk's heart to say, like restoring the family, making fatherhood something to be admired and, a goal to seek. And with that comes kind of, he obviously put a big emphasis on civic responsibility, but then also kind of like, the business aspects of it, or being a productive person, which is, we have a whole lot of extractive economics going on. And that's kind of even where that's like that. Well, you have to deal with that comparative aspect a little bit. You got to be flexible. I mean, I think in some ways, maybe the thing is to think, okay, if we're going to survive some sort of apocalypse, what do we need? We need an ark. Well, you can only fit so much into an ark. If I try to fit the whole Catholic Church, I'm going to need a really big ark. But if I can take some of what they got, take the most important parts of that and the most important parts of some other things, and kind of focus on what's important, then at least that is something I can preserve and I can pass on.
You know what, John? Oh, sorry, Paul. No,
Go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, okay. So what was jumping into my mind was a phrase, metagelical dash relational nationalism. Right, get rid of don't mind Christian nationalism. Like now we want metagelical dash relational nationalism. The other thing that jumped into my mind very quickly would be that Origen talked about the Greek philosophers as having a seed planted in their gardens by the grace of God, and that as the Jews were able to approach Christianity through the law, the Greeks were able to approach Christianity through philosophy. And right, that points to that kind of core tradition that you're talking about, Michael, which leads people on down a path. So if there was one thing to be sacralized, right, what is the thing that goes in the box, a small chest in the ark, right, that from which something can bloom?
One of the big transitions I think that we are making right now is a transition from the physical to the virtual. That on one level seems obvious, but when, for example, we compare political violence from 50 years ago till now, we might say that the rhetoric is hot, but the physicality is less. And I think this in some ways connects with Jordan Hall's fifth dimensional warfare, where the kinetic is sublimated by the rhetorical and the virtual. And so what we tend to see is really fierce language online, but the realities of disrupting the electrical grid, the internet, new sales of video games, Netflix, food distribution, all of these things would simply be too costly, that there's sort of a physicalist secularism that gets enforced. And Christianity is sort of behind that. Don't starve people. Don't, and there's maybe a universal basic income that comes up and says, we can have our war between right and left, but, we don't really want people to die in this. We sort of want everybody in their little Netflix boxes we call apartments, sitting there with their game controllers and their keyboards, screaming at each other, maybe fragging each other on video games. But for the most part, the electricity stays on. DoorDash keeps coming to the door. And whether or not we reproduce, well, this is actually part of the reproductive question, which is, children really get in the way of playing your video games. And so if you really love your video games, let's not have any and just keep our own little mental wars going on while we just sort of age and age and age. And then when we get to a point where we can't see well enough and we can't make screens big enough and we can't hear well enough, well, then maid comes and takes out our life, cleans up the apartment for the next rabbit to inhabit the virtual studio.
Well,
Boy, that's dystopian.
well, I mean, someone mentioned in the chat on YouTube the WEF stuff, and I've been thinking about this. Is you will get in the pods and you will eat the bugs, but like we're already there, and yeah, it's not dimensional. I wasn't going to bring that up.
Generational, yeah.
But I'll speak about me and my own personal degeneracy for a moment. I love scotch, and I love marijuana, and I love women, and I have, for the past 3 weeks, despite what you may see online, I've avoided all three. And as I told my priest the other day, I feel so much vigor that I feel a strong desire to lay siege to a city. And and what I think is happening is it's the video games is part of it, the Netflix is part of it. Not having a feast and fast cycle, always filling your belly with the DoorDash. The easy access to whatever form of marijuana is legal in your region, the drinking of the alcohol, and the easy release through online imagery of women. It anesthetizes the aggression and disagreeableness of men. And it's not so much that we're venting through discussion online and stuff that is taking the pressure off there being actual steady violence. It's that we have chemically emasculated and neutered men to the point that there's no capability of engaging in actual warfare anymore on any scale.
Physical warfare.
Yeah. And so basically it's just, we've chemically castrated all the men in the West through easy pleasure seeking. And we've depleted their vigor. And the lack of physical fitness, which can be the obesity issue, but often it's just being so sedentary that you don't build up that physical capacity. And as anybody who has the misfortune of following me on Twitter and or Instagram, I'm consistently posting workout videos. So
that's better than the internet, girls.
So like a physical re-embodiment of masculinity and giving up these easy pleasures that are sapping your vigor is what we need. But when men come around to that, there's going to be actual bombs going off in places.
Well, that's a limbic hack, right, Paul? And I think one of the things is, like, for what purpose, to use a bit of Marxist language, for what purpose is the value of all these generations being extracted, right? And is it simply a run mill to extract as much value of me out, right? I've had children. That was actually counterproductive, since somebody else elsewhere in the world could have had children at a cheaper marginal rate than me, right? And I could have just continued to be in my house consuming. I own, but my house was expensive because it was ridiculous, because there's like everywhere else in the West, a housing crisis, right? Or I could be renting and I could be paying half my salary to rent, right? You are squeezing in an optimized fashion every ounce out of me, right? And I don't like that. And I would just very quickly wrap up, Paul. Like, the war is not kinetic, but if the demographic impact of it is such that the pyramid collapses in, right at the bottom, in a manner equivalent to a whole generation. Like the Ukrainian men who die will never have children, right? That's functionally the same as what's happening in South Korea, right? Where they are simply just being squeezed like oranges. So there's kinetic war, there's fifth/sixth generation war, and there's a singular outcome of man used as a product.
But we've always known that men are not the bottleneck in physical reproduction. It's women. Genghis Khan demonstrated that.
Well, I mean, up until 3 weeks ago, while Paul was sipping scotch in Austin, I'm on these construction sites and I see plenty of manly vigor. And then most of those, a good number of those guys, after they get done building houses, are getting in their car and they're driving around to deliver Paul's DoorDash and, to pay for diapers and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's hard. And I think there's not a good path, but like, it's not, like this is just why, like, I can't deal with the doomerism. Like, I went through the whole thing. I went through all the conspiracies, and then I just was like, okay, but God is more powerful than this. And, and there are these things like I think this is kind of the problem, is that in some sense that we are maybe like so much of what we see on the internet is just whatever it is, it's all gonna whatever it's showing you, it's going to show it to you in a more negative than reality way. It's because it's more salient and it gets you hooked more. And like, so, it is a messy thing. Cause it's like, I'm on these spaces and I'm not, I do my fair amount, deal of complaining about things. Some of this is just me saying, I don't know how to solve these problems. There are maybe ways. I don't know how to reach the people that maybe have more influence to help do things. But it's not like when you give into despair, like that's when it's over. So I'm not going to do that. And I think that there are many more people that are not despairing. Like, I mean, I think that the event, the response to the events of the Charlie Kirk's, after his memorial and all that has been mostly positive. And, I've seen a few people that are on the like, this doesn't prove, this just proves that speech doesn't work. We need to adopt violence. And like, it's like, these are just childish men who have, they've taken this red pill of like this macho version of masculinity that is such an online construct. It's the male to male transgender. They've become the extreme version of male. Yeah, there's female to female. That's what's on OnlyFans.
Whoa.
So, I mean, it's not. People accuse me of black pilling or straight doomerism, and I'm not. I mean, I don't necessarily consider myself that. It is, despite all the advice to go and clean your room, let's say, over almost the past 10 years, it's actually a lot harder to crawl out of these holes than people think. And we're subsidizing these large screen TVs and the Netflix and the cheap internet and the DoorDash, like all these immigrants of quasi-legal status who are delivering the DoorDash. These are all subsidies that are making this possible. The working from home, making it easy for people to live without having to go to a church. We've more or less subsidized the degradation of our young male population. And even if they do crawl out of it, it's hard to figure out how to get on the ladder, a virtuous ladder of rising into something of meaning.
Yeah, you have to discipline yourself because the society isn't going to.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is the problem I'm interested in solving, and this may actually lead to me starting a real YouTube channel, among other things, because I've been going out dancing, I've been working out, and all this other stuff. I have this ability to discipline myself, at least to some degree, despite my bad behavior on Twitter.
Who are you mentoring?
Well, no one yet.
Okay. Well, but so here's the thing is that there's always somebody who's worse, and I mean that's the thing.
I'll take one exception to that.
Okay.
There's one person I can identify as having mentored. When I was right before the inception of Jordan Peterson in 2016, I was working at a startup that I hated. I paid off my crappy Yaris, which I'm still driving, because it's paid off. And I still had a desire to teach from back when I was thinking about getting a PhD. So I started teaching a coding boot camp at night. And I met Dorian Peñalosa. And he followed me on the Peterson nonsense. And then when I said, you got to become a Christian, he did that. And then when I was down in South Florida, where he lives, in 2022, and I went to his non-denominational disaster of a church, I was like, then no, this is not going to do it. You got to become Orthodox. And so before the divorce, I went down for Pascha, and I was his godfather. And so I think there's one case in which I can be accused of mentoring somebody in this world.
All right. Jeff wanted to get in. I want to hear more from Jeff.
Oh, just one of the more effective things that works for me in counseling is a type of literary shock therapy. Pretty much when people come in with depression, anxiety, lacking relevance, I basically just hand them a book, because in Australia anyway, we're very biblically illiterate. And I give them Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And what it does is, they get this wake-up call. Geez, if he can survive that, if he can, what was it that got him through that? And okay, he was a very clever man. He was a psych, and he was an observer. But basically, the meaning he found was he just looked for somebody to help, and really, it's I'm sort of riding on the back of his work. Just reminding people. Things can be tough out there, but you can survive. And when you survive, you think, man, I'd rather have survived that than, had a velvet carpet ride through life. That's what I tell my kids too.
Well, and I think that's it. I think part of what the doomerist anxiety is about now is that most apocalypse until the 20th century has sort of been framed, let's say, in the biblical apocalypse. We have blood up to, a horse's bridle. We have a third of the world dying of famine. If you want to read a doomerist book in some ways, you can read the Apocalypse of St. John. It's also which is what apocalypse is there's also a tremendous victory of the Son of Man riding on a white horse, all of that. I think part of what in this current crisis people feel is basically this dimming, that it's much more sort of fulfilled by the Brave New World, that sort of apocalypse where people are, where virility is sapped. And there've been a number of books like that. Sons of Men, I think there's this book about, basically all the men in the world became sterile. And this is the anxiety left in the wake of Brave New World, and what we've seen in terms of propaganda, and is not so much just human society blowing itself up or killing itself on bayonets, but more human society just slumped over, dying alone in front of YouTube on autoplay.
I think one of the things where I could link some of what you've talked about in the last week, Paul, with what you're talking about, Jeff, has been that idea of technological change. That the more technology, the more technology we have, at least I think this was you, Paul. The more technology we have, the faster the rate of technological progress goes, right? So that it becomes faster and faster and faster. But what doesn't keep up with it is the ability to either gain personal reflection or intuition, or to have, the ability to spread a Viktor Frankl book and to have that talk with people, right? It needs an augmentation, something like the way that I came across Frankl, right, was through Peterson. When I first saw Primo Levi and read his book, and I was like, holy man, things, I really got a sense of what it was rough. And I used the augmented technology of an old-fashioned bookshop, right? But that was a long time ago. And now I'm not getting enough options to find out EDM or to look at these things that are going to snap me out, because the train is going so fast and it's only accelerating.
And I see in Gen Z, Dreer had an interesting, was it Dreer? And someone on Substack had an interesting post on, no, it was Aaron Wren on Substack about Gen Z is sort of the first generation that is in some ways free from a lot of the boomerisms. And when I look, again, I see this real divide in Gen Z. I look at my youngest son, who won't read a book on Kindle, will only read a book on paper, thinks his parents watch too much TV at the end of the day. What's amazing is that he's pretty well versed in what's going on online, and he's pretty much turned away from it. He'll buy his clothes at a thrift store. He'll, now he's sort of got his first adult job, and he's got an hour commute each way. So he comes home pretty tired after a 10-hour day plus 2 hours of commute. But it's interesting watching this Gen Z sort of free from the boomers doing some of their own thing. And,
does that relate to you, Jason, and your sanctification? Is that Paul's son picking a sacred or sanctified thing and from there building his life out?
Yeah, perhaps, right? He's renouncing the world for sure, right? And probably his own sinful flesh along with it, because his sinful flesh wants it. And I'm sure the devil's well integrated into the internet. So he's renouncing all three.
One thing I'd like to suggest for the corner writ large is, let's stop calling it progress. Cheaper TVs and all these things, all these modern conveniences and whatnot. It's not progress. Something is progressing, but in the positive notion of moving towards a good. We've got to remove that from our language, because we're playing into this narrative that is entrapping us. the Solomon asked for wisdom. He didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for long life. He asked for wisdom. And one thing I keep hearing, and I think it's a refrain I hear from you, Paul, is, and other people, is, you know, all the great things that we've gotten from modernity and the post-Enlightenment. And the thing about the wealth and convenience is, from a prosperity gospel perspective, which it feels like we have wholly imbibed in the secular West, is that this is a sign of our virtue that we have all this wealth. But as someone who has feasted beyond wisdom and had quite a lot of wealth in my life, wealth is a test and a judge. And so we need to stop saying that this is progress in a positive sense. We need to stop thinking that the wealth and conveniences that we've earned through hard work are a good thing. They are here to test us and to poison us and to drag us down into the ocean if we're not wise enough to manage them.
Well, if there seems to be anything that is on the chopping block in terms of the post-liberals, you know, Mary Harrington, Feminism Against Progress, Paul Kingsnorth, there have been huge critiques of progress. But as people in the chat have noted, I mean, the video that I made, I'm reading Chesterton in 1905, who is very much questioning it. And of course, all of this talk of progress is in many ways sort of on the back of Christian eschatology. And one of the most unsettled areas of Christian theology is, in fact, eschatology. Will the world continue to get worse? Will the world continue to get better? And then you've got some very interesting critters on those differences. You know, you've got someone like Doug Wilson, who's a post-millennial. And it's like, And then you've got others who are premillennials. But, you know, part of Chesterton's critique, which I thought was very salient, was you really have to, when you're thinking about progress, you really have to think about what you're asking for. Because in many of our lives, we've seen, the iPhone comes out in 2007. And soon enough, we'll have the 20-year anniversary of the iPhone. Folding screens, bigger screens, faster processors, faster internet. There's a small frame element of progress that most of us recognize, and I think in many ways that small frame influences the larger frame. And I think as a society, we are having now, to your point earlier, to your pitch, Paul Rene, we are renegotiating far larger frames than I think we have probably in, over centuries.
It's probably not a shock that the discussion, was it 2 weeks ago or last week, about fundamentalism brought up the fact that it was it 1907, and it's a bit cornball, this take, but after listening to that, I came away with the phrase fundamentalism, right? Which is a bit goofy, right? But I think that gets to this reframing question, and it seems like, that's what Chesterton is about, right? What are the underpinnings?
Chad is dying for us to be more specific. And in some ways, Paul Rene has been the most specific. He's given up the women. He's given up the scotch. He's given up the pot. And, we've got two counselors here who will tell you right off the bat that for a substantial amount of our population, those are no small victories. And, I sort of get back to Jason's pitch, which is, okay, so you're working with someone who got off the booze and got off the pot and got off the porn. All right, well, what's next? Because in some ways, those very small personal challenges we've found technical ways to overcome them. We have groups, we have various ways, but I think Jason's pitch was, what is the bigger frame we want them to go into? And so part of what I see in Christendom, the tension, let's say, between a monastic inspired orthodoxy that says, take that personal asceticism and, go and be a monk and devote your life to prayer. Or the Protestant path, which is the Charlie Kirk path, marry your girlfriend, have a child, support your church, be a good civic player. I mean, in many ways, the Orthodox monastic path and the Protestant family as microchurch, family as little monastery. Because remember, Luther cleaned out the monasteries and had the monks marry the nuns and said, go have children and raise them Christianly. And for John Calvin, the alternative to the monastery was Geneva. He wanted to make the whole city pure.
I wonder sometimes if the monastery was like a necessary developmental stage to get to this societal sanctification. And that sometimes when I see a society that just can't seem to get on the Christianity merry-go-round or train or whatever, maybe they needed to have gone through this purging where, you know what, sex is so powerful. We need some monks and nuns for a few generations before we can actually get to a monogamous marriage that we're going to stick to.
It's not a stage. It's like
I forget with whom I speak. Yeah,
you've got it's also the mimetics thing again. You need to have people that are devoted to praying for the world and serving God with their whole selves. And to bitch about the Anglicans and Henry VIII and the original sin of that nation that they're paying for, not to speak of America's original sin yet, they cleared out the monasteries, and we need the mimetics and the spiritual value of having people like that. And that's definitely one of the problems with Protestantism is there's this egalitarian, everyone the same, everyone doing the same thing.
Everyone's a saint.
And there's not St. Paul, my saint, said we're all saints, we're all set aside. But there is a hierarchy, and having the monasteries, and I forget his name. He's a UPer. that's a part of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at Midwestuary priest in a Rocor church who was in my estuary group. He recommended to me, because I was sad and sulking about the divorce that hadn't quite finalized yet at that point. He said you should go spend some time in at a monastery, which I haven't done yet. But having those spaces is important, and seeing it as a developmental stage just reflects how broken we are as a society, that we think that we evolve. We don't evolve. If anything, we devolve.
Listening to Paul's pitch about Calvin, I realized, crap, I'm a Protestant. That's and then I saw somebody put up a thing about John Chrysostom, and I was like, no, don't worry. So phew, I was nearly whisked out of the Catholic fold into Protestantism, but it resonated. And I don't think what we're talking about here is purely abstract, as opposed to trying to understand how to pull it down into the practical ways of our lives, right? And one thing I was really struck by was reading this kind of a book by a guy called John Cassian about he was a desert father, and it talks about various spirits and demons, right? And all the demons and spirits imposing upon you are what we would call how we feel, how we react, our desires, right? But to the 4th century person, these are actually agents like C.S. Lewis and the scarlet, not the scarlet, the screw tape letters, right? And in a sense, like when we're trying to look at the world around us and to consume the online, and to go back to what you're talking, Paul, to take physical into digital, right? We have to have a re-understanding of what it means to be continuously injected with these spirits, right? Why is it that I'm being forced to do this? Why am I, right? And I can take something like John Cassian, I can take some of these ideas and kind of go, yeah, I am being assailed right now, okay? And I don't necessarily need to think it's a man with a pitchfork and horns, right? But I can practically go, I don't want to look at that imagery on my phone, because although it's there, I need to actively choose to reject it, or I actively choose to turn off the ads on TV. Not in your channel. I leave those down and I turn off the volume, right? But you know what I mean? I can take this idea and actively engage in the world, right? And understand how I can interact with digital.
Can I push back on Paul a little bit? Because
You first and then me.
Just so I think one of the criticisms of the monastery model is that you've got these super Christians that do all the stuff, and then the poor unwashed masses really don't have to have any standards, and that they're not held to those high standards.
This goes to your differential sanctification bit.
Let him finish, Paul. The two people want it. It accounted as a people are saying you're doing good work if they're challenging you. So
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's very interesting point. So that would be my concern with a monastery model, is that the demand on the ordinary citizen then becomes very low, because we've got this super class that does all the things, and then if the peasants are drinking and fornicating and so on, that's not such a big problem, and maybe they can be tidied up by the church itself rather than personal sanctification.
So I think there's a lot of misunderstandings there. So my ex-wife, when I first brought her to Pascha, which is what we call Easter, it means Passover.
It's like Pascua in Spanish, yeah.
She didn't actually understand that we were drinking booze after service in the church. It didn't dawn on her, because she's from some non-denominational Baptist thing or whatever. And the thing is like, monks and nuns and priests, I mean, they drink and they smoke. So that's one thing. And like
only
priest,
during certain times of year.
Yeah.
And the reality of what was going on inside the monastery might be different than
and priests are an icon of Christ, and a fractal emanation of Christ into a particular context, and a father over their parish. But they're able to do that through grace, not through themselves. And as Christ sacrificed himself for the world and made himself lower than others, the monks and nuns are making themselves lower in order to serve the whole world. Some people say that the only reason the world hasn't burned to a cinder is because we still have monastics praying for it. And so seeing that as somehow they're these hoi polloi, high and mighty people, and the rest of the unwashed masses is like, I go through times in my life where I'm a very bad Orthodox Christian, and like I haven't attended church much in the last year and a half because I was in a failing marriage that was breaking me down emotionally, and then I was going through divorce, and I just couldn't get myself to go. And so it's not just that they're people that are differentially sanctified in space. Individuals are differentially sanctified in time.
Yeah.
Let's get Michael in here. He wants a shot at you too,
Okay,
Paul.
so if someone has devoted their life to God, then they are obliged to follow him in whatever way he directs, and that includes submission of all of your natural drives and things that are, you know, part of the good created order and all those things. So for myself, you know, I came to that realization first that obviously there is a distinction between the Christian sexual ethic and the world sexual ethic, you know, in it when I was a high schooler. And then I pursued a career in the ministry, believing that was to be, you know, that is the highest calling. Now, for most of that time, well, you know, yeah, for a lot of that time, I was single, and like evangelical have their monasteries too. You know, they just, you know, they don't, it's not always a permanent thing, but you can be single and put to good work in a lot of ways.
YWAM.
Yeah, and they send them on the missionary field and all this stuff. You know, always in mind wanting that. You know, at a certain point, I came to the understanding that, you know, okay, even though it was like fine to want a wife or whatever, I couldn't necessarily take it as a certain, and if God's will was that I would remain single for the rest of my life, to have like basically the calling of a monk, to be celibate, if that was what God, his desire for my life, and that was his will, then that was no alternative, no matter how much I wanted it, would be superior to that. That was the best plan, if that's what he had in mind. And so I struggled with that because I wanted to be married, but I, you know, realizing that was the truth, I prayed, God, if you want me to be single, I will, that is, if that's what you want for me, then that's what I want. And I prayed that every day for like a year. And I didn't mean it necessarily the first time I prayed it. By the end of the year, I really did mean it. And then God said, no, that's not the plan I have for you. There's this woman that you're supposed to take care of. And, you know, I got married. So, you know, but I didn't have sex until 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, you know? So, and I didn't need a mimetic force compelling me to make that appealing. And I think what Jason was saying is that, you know, I agree with that. These structures probably did serve a very useful purpose in removing the pagan idolatry of sex. But this world was created by a father, and there are certain things about God's word and this world and theology that I never could have figured out before becoming a father. And, you know, makes me a little suspicious of the monastic thinkers with some of their ideas on those subjects. So,
I'll say that's all over the place as an initial remark, and then I'll say this.
I'm going to say no one's praying for the world more than fathers. If you think people care about
sure, that's
the world
fine.
more than fathers,
but I mean, to me, the post Enlightenment, the Protestant West it's the Tower of Babel all over again. Sola Scriptura and all of that. It's the Tower of Babel.
Well, then God will tear it down.
Yes, and that's what's happening. That's what my pitch was.
Okay, well, it's not going back to the monastery.
But the thing, be careful of innovation. Be careful. You know, just like you prayed, God, you know, do your will in my life and give me a plan. Well, breaking away from authority and rebellion, which is at the core of our Western civilization at this point. And I was in a charismatic church before I became Orthodox, and I saw it split over ego and entrepreneurial behaviors, like happens all the time in these churches. And this rebellious nature and spirit that's in us that founded this nation and caused England to break away from the Catholic Church and to deny the authority the Roman Church, like we are living out generational curses here. And so my advice in general is be very careful about innovation. Be very careful about doing things on your own. And if the monastic stuff and the traditional Christianity was set up by God for a reason, and throwing that away was a dangerous move.
It's not thrown away. It's not. I mean, I would say nobody understands rebellion more than fathers either. So,
well, but I'm saying is like the reason for this, like this generational distance, like parents not understanding the Beatles, and this happening generation over generation, is because we've accepted rebellion as a natural part of our life cycle. And the way out of this is going to be putting an end to rebellion. That's the way out.
Rebel against rebellion. That'll fix it. All right. Let's get into some closing statements. Jeff, you've listened to much of this conversation. You sacrificed the most to be here. Sacrificed sleep to get up at 3 a.m. or stayed up all night for this. So congratulations for that. What are some of your summarizing thoughts here?
Oh, I'm just grateful to be able to be here and listen to you guys talk about what you're talking about. I watch with interest, and this is probably not on here, but what appears to be a move back to the Orthodox and liturgical churches that's happening in the States. I think that's happening a little bit here. We're moving away from the large character up the front to something that's a little bit more standard and regular, that reminds us, I go to a church now. We do the Lord's Prayer every week. We do the Apostles' Creed, and and it was formerly the big charismatic church in this little township of Nowra on the south coast of New South Wales. So it's interesting to watch things change, and I thank you for allowing me to be here. Really enjoyed it, and I might try and be here again.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. Jason.
Man, this conversation kicked up a lot of dust, and I don't think it's settled yet. So it's hard to have a closing thought, which is good. I don't mind dust getting kicked up. I'm not saying it, but it's just like there's a lot of thoughts right now. I guess one through line that I can't believe I'm going to say, but I heard a lot of talk about the vigor of men and discipline. When we get down to the practicality of the sanctification thing, we might need some male energy to make that happen. Yeah.
All right. Paul Renee.
Stop rebelling.
I love Paul Renee in a conversation because it's going to be lively.
Well, I was asked if I know the character I play online. I'll leave that up to
a role in Sartori Studios. Maybe you can be their first. But
I have suggested not Satan in terms of the morning star, but Satan in terms of God's chosen adversaries, as in Job, that I am the Satan of the TLC. But I was wondering if I was going to fit that in there, but I did. So learn learn to respect what is God's and what is Caesar's. Learn to love authority. Pick up heavy things and put them down, and stop drinking so much. That's all I got to say.
All right.
Same
All
here.
right. Ends with a sermon. All right, Jeremy.
I think just watch for what's pushing me around and moving me in directions, and then take the idea that that just like fatherhood, things can become transformational, and just like motherhood, as you said at the start, things can become transformational in an instant, right? So set the fundamentals right and leave the transformation cook.
All right. Well, we had a couple sermons already, Michael. Where are you gonna? How do you want to close this thing?
Yeah, I'm adding more masculine vigor to my household.
Congratulations!
So, coming soon.
How many? You're all daughters so far, right?
Yep, 3 girls.
3 girls and a little boy. He's gonna have 3 older sisters. Oh boy, he's gonna need some vigor.
Yeah. I was listening. I said I think there's a lot of Satans in this corner, to be honest. So. But that's okay. Makes life interesting.
All right. Well, I want to thank Jeff and Jason and Paul and Jeremy and Michael for grabbing slots this week. I never know who's going to sign up. I never know what we're going to talk about, which for me is really fun because it's always Friday afternoon is always a surprise. What are we going to talk about? How's this conversation going to go? And Jeff was a first timer, but Jason and Paul and Jeremy and Michael I knew are all really solid guys. So I thought it's going to be an interesting conversation today. So thank you all. And I have dropped the link. Last week, someone said, aren't you going to drop the link? So yeah, the link is dropped. You can come on in and participate if you want to. Those of you currently on screen, you don't have to run away right away. But if Jeff, if you need to take a nap before you have to get on with today's business, I certainly would understand. But thank you all for joining, and we'll talk for a little while, and we'll see if anybody wants to come in. If nobody wants to come in, then we'll just land the plane sometime soon. It's interesting in this conversation about monastics and monasteries. A layer to this is, again, institutions. And number of people noted that monasteries had challenges because they were so inspiring for many people that very quickly, I love that. I love that scene in Forrest Gump where Forrest Gump is sort of being a monastic. He's jogging, and of course, if you lived in the 70s, you remember the jogging fad. He's jogging coast to coast, back and forth. And that display of virility, that display of asceticism inspired people to want to emulate him, to want to support him. And of course, the irony of the postmodern Forrest Gump is there was nothing there. Oh, there's a baby. There was nothing there. He had no message. He had nothing to say. Part of the irony of the monastic movement is it became astoundingly wealthy. And while individual monks didn't necessarily have personal possessions, the monasteries were soon clad with gold. And so you basically had these successive waves within monasticism where you have these subsequent monasteries seeing the problem and trying to address it. No, we're going to be really, really poor. We're not going to have buildings. We're only going to beg. We're only going to be on the streets. And you saw all of that attempting to keep let's say, the pure root going. And so then by the time of the Protestant Reformation, there was a lot of pushback on monastic abuse, hypocrisy, and corruption. And I think so part of what happens with Protestants was you can see already a checks and balances in a family, because part of what you had with male-female opponent processing was in monogamy, men and women were going to hold each other to account in certain ways that would be sort of anti-corruption. Now, there's ways, of course, that the whole family can be corrupted too. There's no foolproofing corruption, but it's interesting to me how, on one hand, in the West, there was a serious moving away from monasticism and a serious move towards secularization of holiness in cities, which also has its corruptions and failures too. And I think in some ways, but the monasteries never went anywhere, and the Protestants had different kinds of monastics and different kinds of monastic hierarchies. And so to me, a lot of that question is about institutionalization and how that can go. So
I just want to say, that kind of an idea I've been trying to figure out, and I think this is some of the solution is, the mega church phase may be on the way out ultimately, but right now they are the holders of vast wealth and resources, including people and families. And I think that the
and
best
they're attacked
thing,
for corruption.
Yes. And the best thing for them to perpetuate is not to keep growing, but to find ways to share those riches. Back. This is actually the funny thing is, like, if the mega churches decide that they want to take up redeemed Zoomers Reconquista, they can one shot that, send some families to all the little dying churches in your city.
Wow, what a vision.
A mega church is a deal between an entrepreneurial star pastor, a set of people that want to be in production, people that want to be lesser stars, and a wide swath of people who want anonymity. And that is very fitting for the age we're in, which is why they're not going to give it up until it collapses under its own weight.
And you could say monastics did the same thing. They wanted walls.
There's a lot of different monastics, and we were both in St. Andrew's Church, and we gild our churches and we paint them and we use fine marble because it's a house of God. And I don't know everything about the history of monasticism. I'm sure in the East, in the deserts, it was a bit different than it was in the West. But I'm not gonna hold it against a monastery for having nice things.
All right.
Personally.
All right. Ranfi, you're on there. I don't know if what say you?
I've been kind of
Walking
listening
through
on
some
and
big
off.
trees.
Yeah, I'm still on the pilgrimage. Got a couple more days before I'm back to reality. But what do I think? I think you kind of have to have the friction both at the individual and at the societal scale. And even within yourself, like when I think about my journey to where I'm at today, it's almost been like an opponent processing to myself. I was a Methodist and now Catholic, right? And when I see that, I was young when I was a Methodist, and I felt like I needed more structure. But that's maybe not for everybody. Maybe people will get mad at saying that. Me saying that. I also find that you see that between people. I've had arguments recently with my brother-in-law about certain things, and it seems to be not less about the content and more about our modes of being. So that's interesting. And then I think you kind of see that at scale play out too in society, whether it's right and left or whether it's with Protestantism and Catholicism or Orthodoxy. So in some ways, I think the friction is necessary. That's the reality. You brushing up against your opponent, processing the reality in order to grow. I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Ranfi. Zach, what's on your mind?
First time to these estuaries, and I just appreciate the format and want to learn more about how you guys do things.
Well, this is, if you look at the beginning, we do it estuary style, and which I mean, the reason we do it estuary style, it sort of opens up a conversation in a surprising way. Someone in the comments said, does the comment get a vote? Maybe I'll figure out a way to do that in the future. The comment would get one vote. They wouldn't get any more than one because otherwise the comment's a little too chaotic. But well, tell us a little bit more about yourself, Zach.
Well, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma here. I'm a Canadian. I moved just after Trump was elected, which is kind of an interesting time. I have 4 kids. We have taken in 1 teenager as well, and
Wow.
I personally am kind of just figuring out how to have a future for my children with the changing future here.
Yeah. All right. Was it a job that brought you to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or you just really like flat land?
My wife grew up in Tulsa. We met doing Youth with a Mission, and we
Protestant
ended up
monastics.
here. Yes, yes. I have a lot of interesting observations on the pros and cons there.
Well, let's hear a few.
There's some talk about sex in the chat, I think there is a real burden where it's like, how do men and women like cohabulate the same space, where it's like YWAM treats it very much like no dating, but I know many YWAMers who the leaders ended up marrying one of the students, and or there's an affair between one of the base leaders, and it's like you have all these, and those things divide, and like my observation is we don't know how to repair. It's like a lot of these things we build are very easily torn down. And when I was, the base I was at for the longest was in Los Angeles, and they'd suffered from there's an affair, and it was very tricky to try to know how to like exist in the space, because there's so much fear that like that would happen again.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because it's sort of so you can segregate men and women, but then you've got the same-sex issues that, we've seen sort of manifest in the Catholic Church. And then there was, rumblings around Seraphim Rose. I don't know if any of that's true or not in the Orthodox Church, because it's interesting, with the, I saw Dreer had that the Roman Catholics had these drones put this giant head of Pope Francis over the Vatican. And I can just, of course, it's on Dreer's blog. I just imagine, thousands of Orthodox seeing that and saying, that's why we're Orthodox. We would do that. We'd only put Jesus up above, maybe the Hagia Sophia. But would the drones, would the Orthodox do that with drones? I don't know if they do that with drones. That would be just a little too Renaissance-ish. So, no, it's interesting how you get this pairing, this contrast between monasticism and the nuclear family. And there's also been in Protestant churches for a long time, there's been a vigorous conversation about singleness, because many people who are single deep within Protestants begin to say, I'm like a second-class citizen. And it's the married people who are, you've got a 2-speed system. It's the married people who are the elites, because we're not going to, I remember in the CRC, it used to be in my grandfather's age, you weren't allowed to be married if you were in seminary. And so what happened when you graduated from seminary, you got married almost right away. And then you went to your first church. Earl Marlink, who was a minister at this church, he was in seminary a little before my father, and still you weren't allowed to be married, but he and his wife were married quietly and didn't tell the seminary. And then the seminary found out about it. And, well, what are they going to do? So then by the time I get to seminary, there's only 3 of us Anglo guys and a whole bunch of married Africans and like 1 woman who are single at seminary, and all the rest are married. And, but I knew one of my friends, actually the pastor of the Olympia CRC, where we did the Northwestuary. At the first church I went to in Paw Paw, he was a single young man. And what he had to deal with was what the calling committees are like, are you not married because you don't like girls? They wanted to have that question answered. And then once he said, no, that's not the reason I'm not married, then suddenly it was game on for all of the mothers of single women in the congregation who are like, we've got a Christian Reformed, an unmarried Christian Reformed minister who actually has social skills and is not a bad looking guy. Maybe my daughter could be a minister's wife and so this is something we never fully resolve.
Can I add a wrinkle to that as well?
Sure.
The monastic and the versus the family. I serve at a women's prison. And when you think of monasteries dividing up by gender, the character of a man's prison and the character of a women's prison are so different. Even though the guard structure is very masculine, the women themselves, it's a whole other world. Like there's literally a knitting circle inside the prison. So like they don't stab each other with the knives, but it got shut down because they gossiped about each other and wrote competing letters to the warden about this one getting out of line and thinking she was all that and this and the other. And then the fight's over. Are you looking at my girlfriend? Like nothing ends. Whereas a man's prison, 2 guys fight it out for 2 minutes and one of them wins. Nothing ever ends. And I just wonder in these monasteries, my theory is if you leave men alone, they will form something like a prison gang or a corporation or the military. That's just what they'll do. Women will form a knitting circle. That's just what they're going to do. And so what does that do when you isolate people by gender rather than having a family where those 2 energies interact and maybe constrain and uplift each other?
I mean, I'll just interject real quickly. I think like all this worry about 2-speed Christianity and egalitarianism that's very much post-Enlightenment, post-Protestant. It's like, can we just accept that, people are different and that there's value in segregating the sexes, and that maybe we should probably go back to that for primary education and things like that. And that's,
I got the 1-speed, 2-speed thing from a Roman Catholic. That was Charles Taylor. So
no, I'm saying we need to accept that there's going to be these different speeds and stop trying to equalize everything. I think that's the over concern about things not being even and equal, I think is very problematic.
But every complaint or criticism is in some ways the voice of rebellion.
Sure.
The concern about egalitarianism is a feminine concern because men will typically organize themselves in a hierarchy and be fine with it.
Okay, but women organize themselves into gossiping circles and they spread all sorts of information that men are no the wiser for. So I think there are strange symmetries here that we ignore, and when we say, men hierarchize.
So this is a problem where the church needs to get more involved in the secular realm, specifically, like, and this was where I put the central thing of my idea is in the career area, because because since the Industrial Revolution, the career area has become competitive, where it used to be much more cooperative and it's and segregated. Like you should have masculine jobs that men like to do and jobs that women like to do. But if it's, not, if the telos is oriented towards Christ and the production for fruitful means rather than just GDP, then that can be actually an enjoyable experience. So, but that won't happen if people that don't care about God don't actually get involved in that realm of life. So,
All right, Eddie, let's hear from you.
Hey, I just wanted to get in here real quick. I wanted to listen to the whole thing because I really appreciate you guys gave me so much love and attention last time that I was hoping that I could listen to everything and maybe give you all something, but unfortunately I had to have a long talk with a nice old lady about how much money she was going to have to spend on her pool. Unfortunately, so I just wanted to say that after last week's live stream, I felt very, very good about having been able to get everything off my chest. And then I realized that I didn't remember anything of what anybody said. And so it was a blessing to be able to go back and listen to it all over again. And that was really, really helpful. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of, the technology. And I wanted to give a shout out to Chad as well, because his instant reaction to my island metaphor, saying lean into that, be a husband. I really loved that, and it reminded me of my love for a particular romance trope that I've seen in Brent Weeks' fantasy novels, where you have a couple who don't know each other, don't like each other, but for political reasons they have to get married, and then over the course of the drama they fall in love.
That when we're talking about hierarchies, basically hierarchies and equalities with men and women, there was a woman at the Connecticut estuary retreat that Michael was at, who at one point she said, this men-women thing, men are much more comfortable with hierarchies because they sort of understand exactly the dynamic that Jason said. Women are can get very uncomfortable with hierarchies because of the physical difference between them. Because as a group, women are going to tend to be more, in terms of physicality, they're in trouble squared off against a man, which that means that women then use other tools, and women tend to, as a group, stay in a collective and have each other's back, especially when a man is introduced, if the man is a threat. But if the man is an opportunity, then suddenly that's when really the knitting needles come out. And then they can, fight with each other. And what's so interesting about that trope, Eddie, is women almost always are anxious about domination. And yet also one of the most recurrent fantasies about women involve being dominated, but in some ways being dominated on their own terms. And so, I don't think we're ever in this world going to really get to the bottom of the man-woman thing. Certainly not 8 guys on the screen. And adding women, I don't think will help us. It's true. Go ahead.
One thing that came to mind, I like learning from other cultures, and I recently learned about an Indian seminary where there was men and women together. They're not no dating, they're not really even supposed to talk to each other, and the rules are pretty simple. It's like once they finish seminary, they need to get married, and once they're married, then they can start a church. And that's the rinse and repeat. And they're starting churches left, right, and center. And it's, I don't know. I think there's something to the whole, like, elders are kind of judged on the character of their children and stuff. Like, there is some real value in enduring things with starting with marriage. But it's, I don't know. It's not a solution, but just something that came to mind.
It occurred to me some time ago, and this is me speaking as a person who has no children, that you're not really an adult in very important ways until you have kids.
And all the single people felt like second-class citizens hearing that. Unless they have children as single people, which is...
Yeah.
Michigan man Sam, you jumped in here. What do you have to say?
Well, I guess I'll say one thing that I think my Protestant brothers will like, which is one of the things I think about is I think one of our biggest temptations in modernity is towards boredom. And a lot of what Paul Renee is talking about, and it's very well put actually in a Steve Carell movie of all things, Seek Your Friend for the End of the World, where the question is, how do you find meaning when all your needs are met? And in that sense, I think like there's a temptation to think that meaning is somewhere else. But I think for myself, and there's a way in which if I went to a monastery and was just like, oh, I'm going to be a scribe, I think that would be a turning away from what God has called me to, both as a husband and as a father. So I think of that. And I mean, the question is I guess, how do you become a saint, right? That's a big one. And it seems to me pretty obvious that the paths to sainthood are not all going to look exactly the same. But I guess the part, though, that I'll say is the other thing I've thought about is when I had moved back to Michigan from being in different places, I spent some time being a security guard. And one of the places I went to was Sacred Heart Seminary in Detroit. And I thought of that place, and not that it's perfect, but it seemed like a place of love and encouragement and of joy and brotherhood. And I think there's a way in which, like, I know you just kind of made the joke a little bit, and all the single people felt self-conscious, in which, I mean, Protestants, like, what is the model for being single in Protestantism? And at least historically, it's Silas Marner, right? It's kind of like the old guy that everyone tells to keep the kids away from. It's like this idea that you, in some ways, haven't become a full person if you don't have children. And I mean, that's something that I know I've personally wrestled with. And I think there is a great value in the idea of the person who's set aside for God. And one of the things I think we're all kind of dealing with is, I mean, so the median age for marriage, if you're a man, is, I believe, 29. It might even be a little bit older. And it's 27 for women. And it's like, well, I mean, that means that even if you, and that's median, so I mean, half the population on average will be getting married later than that, which is very old compared to historical means. It's like, how do we create a good model for what life means outside of family? And I do think that's a lot of what Protestantism is struggling with and thinking about, because even if you do get married, I mean, and you have children, I mean, you still might have a big chunk of your life where marriage and children and family life isn't part of it compared to older generations. And yeah, one of my favorite things of yours, Paul, was the sermon you gave at after the Chino conference. And I really think it is one of the things I think everyone who follows TLC should be thinking about and listen to.
All right. Well, thank you. Wearing Jacob's. Go ahead, Paul.
As someone who went through an Orthodox wedding,
went through.
Well, it's
You
no
mean a
longer.
crowning? It's a
What?
crowning, right?
Yes, it's no longer a marriage, technically speaking. We say it's it's martyrdom and marriages, and maybe the frictions in my marriage were too much for it to be productive martyrdom, but I think marriage done well, because loving people is hard, is a fine path towards sainthood. And I mean, I'll caveat this by saying I still love my wife, and it's still difficult to do so. So
That's what Tim Keller's book on marriage is about.
So I don't think you're not excluded from sainthood if you're not some weirdo sexless guy in the desert, because we're all given our particular struggles, and even in a working marriage, I can see it, being able to love that person over your lifetime is no easy task.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop off in a sec. So my last thing to say, I would not have been nearly as successful in my marriage if it had happened before my monastic phase. That and the willingness to give it up, and was really important to figuring out what the purpose of marriage is. That being said, I think probably most husbands and fathers would like to have a little trip back into the monastery at certain points in their life. So, but I'm gonna head out. So it's good to talk to everybody.
All right, thank you, Michael.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking of the idea of sainthood, and I mean, I guess we aspire to be saints, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I think of the saints I know. I think of a lady who. She was in her 70s, actually, and she worked a job in a auto manufacturing plant that she had started after she was a cancer survivor in her 60s. But she had a son who was in his 50s that she was a primary caretaker of. And I remember just telling her one day, like, man, like, it seems like you do a whole lot, and I'm sure your son, even if he can't communicate it very well, really appreciates everything that you do. And her response, it stings. She just says, well, when God gives you a blessing, and it's like, oof, I mean, she's a saint. I mean, it makes me tear up thinking about it, but I mean, do we want that martyrdom, that dying of the self, that kind of sainthood takes?
You're gonna get it. You're gonna get the suffering no matter what. It's
might as well get a little sex with it.
Oh, that's one way to put it. Oh my God.
Comment could possibly be taken out of context later.
Hey.
Oh, God.
Hey, this is all.
Welcome there, corner citizen.
Hey, this is all biblical. Doesn't it Paul say not to burn with desire? So it's better that you're married. This is straight. This is straight from the good book.
Yeah.
Still got your girlfriend there?
Yeah. Everything's cooking along, the master plan, no one believed me, slowly, ever so like the tectonic plates come together. But Yeah, I mean, I guess this is a great discussion, and I never grow tired of it, however many times we have it. But the only thing I'd add is like closing doors and just like committing to things. You get a reward that you don't see at the outset. Like when you just say, "I'm just here," and it doesn't have to be marriage. It can be I'm going to go to this party and I'm not going to bring my cell phone. Okay, you're in this room with a bunch of people. Okay, I'm really bored. Well, that boredom is a gift because it's like, okay, I kind of don't want to talk to this person, but I'm so bored, I'm going to go talk to this person. And then, oh wow, I actually had a really fun time and I didn't even notice I totally forgot I didn't have my cell phone and we actually had this really cool conversation, blah 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 blah. In the same way, like if you just commit yourself to, when people say like, it's so well. I think one of the hidden gifts is like everyone's complaining about how hard starting marriages and everything is. But the secret gift is just like that makes you excited at the party to talk to someone you wouldn't normally talk to. It can make you excited to commit to someone who you might not fully commit to. And so when you just say, this is like upon this rock, I build my church, like this is what I'm committing to, like all these strange returns come to you, of like you appreciate things and you see things. But and I think it's like us gathering up all these sort of things that seem like resentments or seem like hardships, and that can build you the thing that will get you out of there, that can help you. So, of just like not seeing it, a lack of opportunities, a lack of choices, a lack of distractions is actually a gift that like allows you to really see something as a blessing. Because you can see when you hear people like, oh, my marriage is the blessing of all blessings, and you'll hear a 14-year-old boy like, oh yeah, but you'd probably rather just sleep with 30 Victoria's Secret models. It's like, that's
Would you,
true.
though?
But that's what the 14-year-old boy thinks. But he doesn't see on the other side the fact that someone committed. In the end, the guy who's 80 wouldn't have rather slept with 30 Victoria's Secret models. But the 14-year-old doesn't see that because he hasn't like been through that process.
Right.
So it's easy for us to like, make like, innuendo jokes. He ha ha ha.
He hasn't been to a women's prison.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, that commitment, the sacrifice, and like all these hardships can participate in the formation process that allows you to see these things as the real gift that they are, that allows you to see Christ on the road, that we recognized him by the way he taught us.
That reminds me of Paul. You've talked about how basically you're regularly talking about the difficult aspects of church, and people are like, hey, promote it more. Well, in regards to boredom and closing doors and that sort of thing, divine liturgy is so long, and I'm sitting there for like 2.5 hours
Sitting?
Well, sitting and standing, back and forth and everything.
Yours has chairs? What kind
Yeah.
of weak sauce Orthodox church do you go to?
But that boredom has been so helpful. Has been so helpful in just my ability to be comfortable with not being constantly stimulated with some sort of screen entertainment.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, Peugeot, when we... Oh, sorry, PPK.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I think Peugeot talked about that when we did that tour in in Chino, of like, or maybe it was a YouTube video, but like just being bored and the smells and bells, like that's part. Why do you think they have drawings on the walls? It's just like, it's like being bored and like, oh, who's that guy? Why is he getting turned upside down and poured into boiling oil? I don't know. Seems like it sucks. I don't know. Why are there skulls everywhere? I don't know. So like, I think, the few Eastern Orthodox liturgies I've gone to is like, yeah, it's like super valuable. Just like, I can't pay attention to someone singing in Greek for 2 hours. Like, I'm like, okay, they're still talking a language I don't know. Okay, great. Well, my fingernails are looking interesting and this and that. But yeah, it's like that's to me. I don't know. I mean, I think
this is abuse. I consider this abuse. But I guess, with all the things to say about Protestants, this is fair. So
yeah, if Phlebas says, if you're bored in the CRC, you read the confessions, and you'd see that with, people would open up the Psalter hymnal and they'd thumb to the back and they'd read something. As a kid, I'd always, because there wasn't much to look at in the Protestant church, sometimes they'd have like nice patterns in the ceiling, or I'd look at, and I'd sit there. And Northside, my mom always had me segregated from my sisters because I was a pest. And then the wind would blow the curtains open. I could look outside for just a second, and then they'd go down. But we had mercifully like hour and 15 services in the CRC. So, even then it stressed my ADHD childhood self. So, all right. I don't see a lot of other people coming in. Any last words before I end the stream?
Well, last time I was an active churchgoer, I was 12. So, am I allowed to like flirt with girls and ask for their number?
Oh my gosh.
What? I mean, that's what coffee hour is for.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's called fellowship.
I don't mean like in the church or like during the service.
During the service.
Church is a good place to look for a partner. I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
Church is I tell people, if if you want to find a partner, go to it. And I see people all the time, they'll go to Living Stones and they realize the single women here are all over 80. Maybe I'll go to the singles group at the mega church on the outskirts of town and just do Living Stones on Sunday morning. So, yeah.
If you want a hot tip, just plagiarize Peugeot's takes and then just pass them off as your own in Bible study, and then people are like, "Oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way."
That's the real gift of Protestant church. You can say Jonathan Peugeot, and they'll say, "Who?"
No, you don't tell them Jonathan Peugeot. You say Alan Ingle thought of this right now in the moment. We were the inspired Holy Word of Christ. It came down. The Holy Spirit. What are you talking about? Crediting other people when you make an insight in Bible study? You haven't flirted in Bible study in many moons, okay?
I have not flirted in Bible study in many, many years. It was back before the internet, boys and girls, when me and my wife met. But as in terms of what our one gentleman said, Christian Missions was a place where you could that was a good place in college to get to know women, and because you're looking for other girls who are serious about Christianity, and you get to spend a lot of time together, and there's not a lot of pressure because you're just there and you get to know each other. I always found Bible studies and mission groups, mission trips, mission retreats, excellent places to find Christian young women who could become wives. So I know about today, all those dating apps. I'm sure they got Christian dating apps. I know they had Christian websites. Do they have Christian dating apps?
Yeah, but they're pretty garbage.
I think all the dating apps are like totally useless at this point.
But they're garbage in different ways. It's just the I won't recount it, but I sent you a tweet today, Paul, in DM that I think spells out the issues. So
Okay.
if you take a look at that.
Well, I would imagine that an app or a website. I was listening to where was this from? I gotta be careful with these real life stories. So it was a widow or widower, and of course widowers have much better odds than widows, and they want to get remarried after their spouse dies. And so he was doing dating websites or something, and I think one of his daughters saw it was on his computer's like, "No, this isn't the dating website you should use." And then he put him on the Christian ones, and was able to find someone and got remarried. I think then Then I heard a joke that the guy's first wife was Joyce, and so then his second wife was also Joyce, and so the family called her Rejoice. But yeah, I don't know. Back in the day, we'd meet girls in person. I mean, Christian college was the place to. It was well known that if you didn't leave Christian college with a wife or at least a prospect, you missed out on probably, the biggest buffet possible, because then you've just got a little church to sample from. So far be it from me to give dating advice who hasn't dated since the 80s. All right. Have we come to the end? We've come to the end. All right. Any y'all don't see what any branding requests? How about the holy smoke and mirrors? Here we go.
Feel it, that sweet, sweet revelation. The truth is served, take a sip. Ooh, it's a holy sensation. Sip the Kool-Aid, baby. Pass the cup, don't say maybe. Once you're in, you're never out. Say amen, scream and shout. Sip Now don't you question, just obey. Groove with us and fade away.
I'm gonna tell you a little story about me and my friends, about something we did way back when. I was eating spaghetti and getting kind of sweaty when all of a sudden in walked Betty. Betty was my girl in these old days, and she had a lot of friends that were walking my way. Said first there was Helen, then there was Ellen, but the best of them all, she had the name of Llewellyn. She had the gleamiest eyes and the prettiest pose, but get this, Paul, she had some pony elbows. But back to the point was this: Betty was jealous of my friend Sis. Sis at 7, Liz at 8. I thought that plan had worked, but it didn't work great. But take Fred's advice and never try that. It probably won't work and you might get slapped. Yeah.
That's my favorite of your raps, Fred.
Here it is. Soda, gotta have it. One love, baby.
Freddie's drug. All right, here we go.
Ready.
One
love. 52.
All right. 52 in the can.
Ken knew happy, though. Great Ken knew happy, and I can rejoice about that.
Although this world will devastate you, and rejoice although this world will penetrate you, and rejoice on although you will not survive. Rejoice you'll never make it out alive.
Excellent rehearsal, gentlemen.
And rejoice, your hair, it smells like burning hair. Oh, rejoice, your nails all got chewed off. Oh, rejoice, and holy fuck, you're bleeding there. Oh, rejoice, you burn your whole beard off. Rejoice despite the fact this world will hurt you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will kill you. And rejoice despite the fact this world will tear you to shreds. Rejoice because you're trying your best.
Hey, I love that one.
That's gorgeous. Thank you, brother. Who's that brother?
You've heard your neighbor go on about Jesus. They claim their life is renewed. You're happy for them and wonder about it, but surely that isn't for you. Well, what does it mean, and where does life lead, and what they say, could it be true? Well, open your mind, my friend, you may find that Jesus is calling you too. We hear explanations, we try to be patient, opinions the world doesn't lack. They say he's the way, have faith and be saved. It's almost as simple as that. You've looked for a sign, well this is the time. The answers have come into view. He'll wipe all your tears and cancel your fears. Well, Jesus is calling you to a strong hesitation for great invitation, a feeling we've all felt ourselves. And now we are gathered at life-giving water. It overflows out of the well. Well, he is the man and he has a plan. You're wondering what you should do. I tell you, arise, repent, be baptized, for Jesus is calling you to. Though life won't be perfect, few things will be certain. We follow with all of our hearts. We walk in the light, we can see with our eyes. We understand only in part. We pick up our cross, we don't count our loss. What else is there left to do? The way it is right, his burden is light. Yes, Jesus is calling you to. We all know there's something that's wrong with existence. The nations are warring with blame. But what if I told you a good guy, he loves you, but sin, it has kept us away. There's got to be more, and you can be sure eternity time flies into. But as your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to. And when your days in, you'll still have a friend when Jesus is calling you to.
Where are you here?
Oh, there I am. Hey.
Where are you? Where?
Got me?
Oh boy. Yeah. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Come on, man.
Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Yeah.
Walk with my mama.
You walk with my mama.
Walk with me.
Walk with me too.
You walk with my mama.
Yeah.
Walk with me.
And walk with me too.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus journey.
I want Jesus.
Want Jesus.
Walk with me.
Walk with me. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. Hold my hand, Lord. Hold my hand. All along this Jesus walk with Moses.
Walk with me.
Walk with me.
Walk with Moses. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
While I'm home.
Yeah.
Jesus
journey.
I want Jesus.
I want Jesus to walk with me.
Say, walk with me, Lord. How y'all doing? Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me.
Walk with me.
I'm on my I want Jesus.
I want Jesus
to walk with me.
To walk with me. Walk with David, a little shepherd boy. Yeah, you made him a great king. I know David shouted for joy. He walked with David, and he's a little shepherd boy. You made him a great king. And David shouted for joy.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. So walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. All along this Jesus journey. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me. You gotta walk with me, Lord.
Yeah! That was rocking great, brother.
Oh, yeah.